How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to Under the Crown. I'm Carter Billings, and I'm sitting here with my new friend Dan Denmark, and we're in Texas, and we're just going to kind of jump into it. I'll tell you a little bit about him. He's a Southern California native. He's been a lifelong cowboy, in a family of cowboys, and is raised in a family of cowboys. He's a team roper, a dang sure enough horseman. He's been a contractor and a proud father. We first met over here right outside of Weatherford. What is the name of that arena?
I think it's called Parker County.
Parker County. And what was the production that puts on those ropings?
I think that one was it J.C. Williams put that one on?
Yeah, that's right.
I'm pretty sure, yeah.
Yeah, I've seen him kind of bounce around. I haven't had a chance to meet him yet.
He's been doing them ropings at that arena for a little bit.
Gotcha. Yeah, and then we have a mutual friend, Brad Foster's kind of who made the connection there, so give him a shout out.
Good guy.
But definitely, like, you grabbed my attention as soon as I saw you riding through that arena. Actually, before you were in the arena, I saw you coming up out of the parking lot, if I'm being honest, and I kind of was peeking at you the whole time, and then I saw you and Brad talking, and I knew I had to get in the middle of that. But you were riding a great, big, beautiful buckskin horse, and you could tell within seconds of that horse getting around that arena that he was different than the rest of these horses. And not to down talk anyone else's horses, but just to up talk yours. I mean, when that horse would make a run and his head instantly dropped and he licked his lips and he just walked off like a ranch horse would, but in the arena. I mean, that horse has probably seen his fair share of a full day's work, I could tell.
Sure. Yep.
And we came up and talked for a minute, and you were just super friendly and big smile and willing to talk and give a little bit of your time to someone you didn't know. And then I was watching you rope, and you had a pretty good run. I can't remember what it was, but you kind of leaned back over your saddle and stuck your tongue out at your heeler, and I was thinking, I really like that, just the enthusiasm and enjoying what you were doing so much. I think that's an easy thing for guys to forget, is that you're supposed to be having fun with it.
Yeah, you got to be enjoying yourself, that's for sure.
So I'd like to just kind of start and just tell us a little bit about where you grew up and how you grew up, and we'll just kind of move through your life from there. We'll just start wherever you think, and as early as you think we need to start.
You bet. No, we can do that. I appreciate you having me do this. I've been on the other end of them, listening to them, and I never thought that I'd ever get a chance to do something like this. But thanks for coming out and having us on it. We appreciate it. But yeah, I grew up there in Southern California. I was raised there. I grew up on an Indian reservation. My mom's Native American. We come from a tribe, they call it Epi, the Epi Nation, but it's just a small, I think that reservation is like 22,000 acres. There's 6 of us kids, and then my mom went on and adopted 4 more after we had kind of got about out of the house, and she adopted 4. Like, she was a foster care parent for some of the Native American kids from different reservations around there. So she got attached to 4 siblings. They were just babies when she got them, and so she adopted those. So we've got, they're a pretty big family.
Absolutely.
And then in Southern California, people don't realize, but there's a bunch of small tribes, and they're all pretty much related. A different language. 50 miles that way, there'll be a reservation. The language will be different. You might go 100 miles further south, and there'll be another one there, different language, maybe kind of the same dialect, but they're all just different, small tribes around there. But people are really pretty close around there, and it was a great place to grow up. I mean, we had a lot of people that we knew, as far as, we'd go to funerals were a big thing when people would pass away, and they had their own way of burying the dead, when they do their ceremonies and stuff, and people got together and kind of, helped each other up. It was a good place to be raised. But my dad, he, I give a lot of credit to my success in life from my dad, because he's never not worked. My dad's just been a working son of a gun. He turned 76 yesterday, and he's the senior driver at a concrete plant. I mean,
oh wow.
he's never not worked. He's worked hard, and so he raised us that way. He told us, hey, this is what you got to do, and we watched him, and hell, we just kept on doing. You know, it's one of them deals where I didn't know any other way, but it was a good place to raise, you know, get raised. I got I got to do a lot of things like hunt, catch a lot of wild cattle. There was lots of wild cattle on that place, and so it was just a good spot for a young man to kind of grow up and be wild, I guess, you know.
Absolutely. So in that context with them wild cattle, and we'll get more into this later, but I just don't want to miss this thought real quick. Were you guys catching those cattle and taking them to sale, or were you guys catching them and distributing it across the community, like just supplying your own food?
No, we were catching them and taking them to sale. There was a place not far from us that would buy them,
Gotcha.
and we could pull in there. And you know, it's one of them deals where there was so many resources that we had on the reservation. We could cut Christmas trees, we cut firewood, so we had ways to make it. You know, when you're on the reservation, usually you're isolated a little bit.
Absolutely.
And you get around these people that they stay there, they don't go anywhere. So it's kind of its own little world, you know. You can. So we were doing whatever we had to do to survive over there and make a living. And when I got old enough to where I could start catching wild cattle, my uncle, see, I'm probably, my boys are probably sixth generation cowboys. I mean, they talk about how my ancestors, my great grandfather and stuff, this was before cars, how they would ride off the mountain and go to church, and you know, they'd have a horse just really, really ride around, could stop, slide, turn around. They were horsemen. They were real good, and they have had a good reputation from what I've heard from some other elders around there. So, you know, it's been in our blood. And so when I got to the age of where I could go catch cattle myself, I think I was 13 years old, probably just maybe in high school.
Oh wow.
And I'd leave the house a horseback after school maybe, and I'd ride up the mountain and I'd catch something. And a lot of times I'd snub them to a tree or whatever. And my uncles worked on that. There's a ranch we'll talk about that had a lot to do with my upbringing that bordered the reservation. And so they all, generations, had worked at that ranch. And I'd give them a call when I got down the hill, and they'd come help me the next morning. I wouldn't go to school, and we'd lead one out. And then my folks never bought me any school clothes when I went to high school. So I was making money that way. Yeah, if we'd kill deer, you know, and we'd pass that deer meat around to some of the people that needed it.
Yeah.
But as far as the beef goes, we were getting dollars for the
Gotcha.
beef.
Absolutely. Yeah. And what were those wild cattle bringing back then? Would you get a few $100s for them?
I think so. Like we'd catch a big bull that might weigh 1,400 or something. You know, I think back then.
When you're a teen, what year would this be about?
This was probably I graduated high school in '87, so it would have been in the, you know, the mid '80s probably.
Gotcha.
In there.
Heck yeah.
But yeah, they sure weren't bringing what they're bringing today. That's for sure.
Man, it's incredible what they're bringing today. I was just talking not to get off subject, but I was talking with some buddies that they were doing a bunch of custom meat orders, and they said that cattle are bringing so much on the hoof now, it's not even worth going through the trouble of packing them. They're making all their extra money.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
so
it's
getting harder to find that good beef if you're not just doing it yourself.
Yep.
But so anyways, you're in your teens and you say you're going out by yourself. Are you literally just solo, you and a horse? Are you taking dogs or any buddies or anything with you when you're out this? Or
you know, I was pretty green back then. My uncles were sure enough good hands, and I was raised around them. And I mean, I figured out how I could go catch something.
Yeah.
And had a horse that who knows how good he was. I mean, he was just a horse. But I would go catch stuff, and I'd call them, and the next day they'd cuss me and chew me up one side and down the other for doing what I did. And I was like, it worked. I mean, I caught him. Yeah, he was on the fight, and I got him tied down. And they would just like, you can't be doing that, you know. And they'd laugh about it, and we'd go on. But I was pretty much by myself, no dogs. I think I had a couple dogs, but they weren't catch dogs, that's for sure. But yeah, it was just kind of, like I said, I didn't know nobody was there to really show me certain things to do. I just kind of learned a lot of it on my own until I started once I got out of school, and then I left. I left and went to work on a lot of ranches. I figured then, you know, that's what I was meant to be a cowboy. I thought, hell, I'm gonna just go everywhere I can go.
So you had mentioned that there was a big percentage of people that would, you know, if you're on the res, you kind of stayed within the res and tried to be as self-sufficient as you could within there. And you also talk about some good horsemanship coming out of that place. Were there a lot of people that were hitting the road, rodeoing, or doing anything like that, or was it all just ranching and catching wild cattle and stuff just right there at home and to the sale yard and back?
Yeah, that's all it was. Is pretty much right there. I mean, there wasn't even a lot of young guys that were carrying on the tradition. You know, there was very few of us. There might have been, there wasn't very many at all. But no, they never went anywhere. I mean, they stayed right there. I don't know that they ever really thought they could. You know,
Yeah.
I think they got along fine in that circle. And like I said, when I left there, I thought I was a hand. You know, I thought I was handy until I left there, and I realized, you know, there's a whole lot bigger world out there. And,
Absolutely.
And they shut me down on the first ranch I went on, and they lined me out and said, hey, this is not how we do it. And I thought, dang, you know, I thought I was pretty handy, but I had a lot more learning to do.
What was your first kind of like wake up to there's different ways to go about this, and like a whole different, I'm sure an entirely different set of etiquette and like structure to just the way you ride your horse, to the gather, to how you operate when you finally hit the pens? Like how did you get that first opportunity on a ranch outside of the reservation, and what were some of the first kind of like wake up calls you had there?
Well, there was a ranch that bordered the reservation. It was 44,000 acres, and they run a lot of yearlings on that place. They'd probably run, I think when it was full, it was about 7,000 head on it. So there was a lot of roping and doctoring and shipping. And that's where my uncles worked. And they did, everything they did there was the way that they've always done it there. And there were some good hands on that ranch. A lot of the Tejon guys from up in Bakersfield and stuff, where you're from, those are good cowboys. I mean,
Absolutely.
They were good. And my uncle Eddie Wachania was one of those kind of guys. But he worked with a lot of Tejon guys. So they were all pretty handy. And when I got over there, you know, none of those guys were around at that time, but it was just all of us, my uncles. Basically, it was just my uncles, and we just, I'm not going to say it was a free for all, but we got around and did it the way it worked, and it worked fine. And I got along pretty good. But then when I left, I think I was 21 when I went to the ZX Ranch up there. Their headquarters was Paisley, Oregon. And they stuck me up on the viewpoint up there at Christmas Valley.
Gotcha. Okay.
And that ranch was 1.5 million acres, and the viewpoint, the north end, was 750,000. So on the south end, you had the feedlot there at Paisley. You had the Sycan Marsh. They had, that grass was that tall, and they had, I think we had 3,500 head of cows on that north end. I mean, so we were spread out. But anyway, the first time we gathered, I remember Corvin Cooper, all the Cooper boys, they were big time at the ZX, and Corvin was a hell of a hand, cow boss, good guy. And we started to gather, the first big gather I went on, and then he dropped me off, and he went on around, and he said he was going to go up into this corner and stuff. Well, I ended up getting into his country, and I went and checked all his country. So all of a sudden, here he come back, and I know he's seen me up there, and I was wondering, what in the hell is he doing? You know, I've been all through there, and he went up. He probably knocked my tracks out. And when he come back down, I just thought, this guy, you know, I don't know if he was paying attention, but we got to the gather, got it thrown together, and he come up and he said, hey, listen, you know, this is my country, and you got off over in there, and that's okay. But he said, I'm not going to trust that you didn't miss a cow over there, and I'm going back because it's on me if I don't go. This is how we do things. And then I was like, okay. And I just got better. But I realized when I went to work there, I mean, it was all buckaroos, you know, slick horn, big ropes, long ropes. They were everywhere I've ever worked, you know, and I've never knocked the guys that tied on or knocked the guys that would, you know, dally on a slick horn, because I got to work with all different aspects of cowboying, and I wanted to do it just to see. But if you get good hands in the corral or whatever on the gather, if you're gonna do a good job. But I've never knocked a certain way they do things in certain country. You go brand, however you guys want to brand, that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's pretty important. You know, I hear a lot of people, you know, get kind of defensive of their way versus the other. And, you know, on other podcasts, you know, I've heard stories of guys from Texas that, ship up to Montana to do something, and they run into a crew to help them get some calves branded, and talking about, oh, they had their head and heel and they're missing these big loops and it's halfway across the pen. And then you can find other guys that talk about, you know, these silly Texans that just run everything into the ground. And I mean,
Oh yeah.
I think the best is exactly what you just said, and I have kind of a similar experience because I was up in some kind of similar country to that. I was not too far away from there, over in Sprague River, Oregon, and then also in Burns Junction area at one point too.
Yeah.
And the clash of those two together, me and my buddy Casey, we call ourselves puncheroos because we kind of get into everything. We can throw a couple big loops, and you know, we might throw a top button on our shirt every now and then, but we also can get right up on top of them and get something shut down in a hurry too. And
Yeah.
I think that's what makes a hand is exactly what you had just said, is fit into whatever situation you're in, because if you can match what everybody else is doing,
Yeah.
you know there's going to be good flow. There's no sense in trying to be a standout opposite in a pen where everybody is functioning a certain way.
Yeah, I agree. You know, there's like these Texans, they got a way. They know how to get things done. I mean, they've got it figured out. But like I'll say, up in Montana, I worked on the Padlock Ranch too. When I've been on 3 or 4 wagons on that ranch, and it's the only place I know that you can go in 30 days brand 5,000-6,000 calves. And I mean, they had it figured out. They knew how they were going to do it, but they drug everything there. They were all them calves weighed about the same. And it was just, they had it figured out in that country. Could gather, throw a herd together, cut the dries off, pin them, brand the calves, spray the cows, go to camp, take a nap and eat lunch, come back and move set up for the next day. They did that for 30 days straight. You know, you got sick of it after a while.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine getting tired of branding calves.
Yeah.
It was, when I was there in I worked for the Alvord in southeast Oregon.
Oh yeah.
And there's a big line of ranches there. You've got Trout Creek, the White Horse, the Cooney, Man Lake, us, and some others that I just can't remember the names of anymore. And it seemed like 3 or 4 days a week you just kind of bounce around, do 200 here, a couple hundred over here, and bounce around. And that was a fun summer. So, how long were you up in that Paisley area?
I was there for a season. I went up there when they started turning cows out on the desert, pull them off them pivots, you know, and stayed for about 11 months, I guess, until we preg check cows.
Gotcha.
We went through all the works, weaned the calves, shipped them, and then I could have stayed, you know. I went up there with I had a childhood friend that I grew up with that we were the same age, and that's how I went. He kind of talked me into going, and him and I lived in the bunkhouse. And
how many were in the bunkhouse?
There was only 2 up there, and there was a camp man, and then the Corvin, the cowboy boss, had 2 boys that were pretty handy too. They were little.
Okay.
Jade and I'm trying to think of little Jody, and then his wife cooked, you know. So really, we had, you know, those 3, and Buck and I were in the bunkhouse. But so we went up there, and like I said, he drugged me up there. He'd been up there a little bit, and we spent some time. It was the whole season, and when it come time to, you know, it's getting cold in that country, so being from Southern California, it's pretty easy to start getting a little homesick. And
absolutely.
knowing that there was a window open where he said, hey, if you guys want to stay, you can stay. But if you all want to leave, you hired on for what you're supposed to do, and you're welcome to go. And I was like, well, I'm headed south.
Taking that ticket home.
Yeah.
So up there, they have a pretty good horse program. Did they back then? Were you riding a lot of company horses, or did you take your own?
It was all company horses up there, and the program wasn't the greatest up there when I was there. I mean, we were riding 7-8-year-old snaffle bit horses.
Oh wow.
I mean, they were pretty rank. It's hard to get them shod. It was hard to get them. I mean, they were just. Well, I had 12 head of horses in my string, and we didn't work on Sunday. So if you think about it, you ride 1 a day.
Yeah.
You know, I'd ride a horse every 2 weeks, and we just thought we had to ride everything there. And I mean, there was horses that would try to buck you off, and you know, just hard to get on. They were pretty rough.
Yeah.
And I guess, you know, when you're 21 years old, and Buck, that boy that I grew up with, he was handy. He could ride one. He could sit up there and court one, and it was just like, that's no big deal. This is what we're here supposed to be doing.
Absolutely.
But once you got on them, and you know, we'd look at the map. We'd come back and eat lunch, and we'd look at the map where we'd been and count sections, where we'd cross the fence line, checking fence or whatever. Hell, you'd trot 30 miles before
Yeah.
noon, easy. And you wanted to be on something that was kind of a little bit hard-headed. Just turn them loose and let them go.
Yeah.
So the horses weren't the greatest. They had, like down there where Wade Cooper was, they were in that feed yard, so they had some better horses down there. They had some pretty good horses. I mean, there was good horses on that ranch. Don't
Yeah.
get me wrong, but we didn't get to see very many of them. And then when those guys would come up, they sent a couple colts up there while I was there, and they were some good colts. And I was good to them and didn't ask them to buck. You know, you just got
Yeah.
on and tried to make a horse. And but up there on, they call it the Sycan Marsh, a guy named Mark Williams was a cowboy boss up there, and there was a lot of pretty good buckaroos that worked up there. And they rode a lot. I mean, we all rode a lot, but they got to do a lot of cow work. And there were some good bridlemen up there.
Yeah.
I remember there was a guy named Roger Peckinick, I think. And just a big old beard, big old hat. I mean, wore cuffs. He wore a leather deal around it. When I first got around him, I'm like, who in the heck's this guy? You know, he was epitome of a buckaroo. I mean, but when he got on a horse, I'd seen him 6 or 7 different times. I'd go help him. And every time I'd seen him, he'd be riding a different one, and every horse was in a spade bit and rode around. And I thought, you know, he doesn't need to. You know, he's handy. You know, you don't. No matter what he wears or how
Yeah.
he looks, but he was well respected. A lot of them guys. There was some good ones over there.
Was there a noticeable difference when you first got outside of the res on this first job in the way horses rode around? Like, granted, I'm sure they're completely different styles when you go from California and up into that Great Basin country and get around some of those more buckaroo guys. But like, just like the way they, like the mechanics of the way they moved, the way they stepped around or packed their heads and stuff like that, or just like softer in the face. Was that pretty obvious, or did you feel like your horses held up compared to them?
You know, it was. I think the way that I kind of seen it as a kid with my uncles, it was comparable because they were more like bridlemen too. They were they took a lot of pride in their horses as far as how they rode. But I was just a kid, and you know, I ruined more horses at that age than I was. You know, I thought I knew a lot, but I didn't. I mean, I'd get mad and go to doing stupid stuff on them. So personally, my horses, yeah, it was a big difference. And you know, it's like anything else. It takes you a long time to stop and slow down and say, hey, I'm going about this wrong. I need to try something different. And it was good for me because I got to be around more of those kind of horses. Everywhere I'd look up, there'd be a guy on a good one. And all of a sudden now it's like, you know, I start looking at that time. I thought, I gotta figure this stuff out because what I'm doing isn't working.
Yeah, you know, I've only just kind of quit cowboying full time here about 8 months ago. Now I'm down here training horses, and so it's still pretty fresh on my mind to look back and think too. Like at that time and that age, and I have some buddies that are like right in the middle of that prime time. You know, early 20s, late teens, really starting to find some rhythm on a horse and cowboying and just getting around country and cattle. Like, there's so much to take in ranching that, like, the horse itself, as far as like making it, is very easy to get pushed to the bottom of the list. Because at the end of the day, you're not getting paid for a fancy horse. You're getting paid for calm, collected cattle in a pen to get sold, whatever your work is, you know. And so, were you having any like opportunities in the evenings, or were you picking these guys' brains about your horsemanship? Did you have any distinct like horsemanship type mentors at that time?
Yeah, you know, I would watch a lot of guys. I was a little bit not as outgoing, I guess, as I am. I grew to be more outgoing and ask. You know, from where I came from, it was kind of, we stayed kind of quiet, didn't say a lot, didn't ask too many questions. But as I started meeting more people and leaving the reservation and starting to get in the real world, you start thinking, okay, I got to start acting like everybody else and start, you know, don't just sit back in the back, just step up front and don't be afraid to ask. But yeah, I seen some guys around there, got a chance to work with, there was a guy named Jeff Hunt that he rode good horses, and he didn't work for the ZX, but he was good friends with Buck, and so we were always around him. But I would watch guys like him,
Mm-hmm.
and I would try to kind of see what they were doing, and maybe, you know, I'd start asking a few questions here and there, and then learning.
Yeah.
But it was almost fast enough pace to where, like, when you were going to do something, you know how it is on them ranches, you got to just go get the job done.
Yeah.
You're not stopping and talking about how you worked a cow or how this happened. I mean, you're just getting her done, you know.
Yeah.
And that was probably one of the things that's why they had 7-year-old snaffle bit horses
Yep.
on the viewpoint, because they didn't have opportunity to go ahead and say, hey, I've only got 3 or 4 in my string, or 5 or 6.
Mm-hmm.
When you got 12, I mean, you just don't get to ride them that often.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. One thing that I always thought about, you know, because exactly what you just said, you don't, you know, when you're in the corral and you're trying to get calves knocked off because you need to get them weighed so you can get them on the trucks because you're worried about shrink or this or that or whatever operation you're doing with them cattle at that time, you're exactly right. There's not a chance to stop and say, hey, how'd you get your horse to, you know, work in that gait like that or something. And so it was a lot of watching and making a horse do, like, how can I make my horse do what they did?
Yep.
And that word make has really hung in my head these last like 6 months now that I've kind of like hit a stride and things are these dots are starting to connect and stuff. And I think that is one thing that a lot of young cowboys get in a habit of, is trying to make a horse do something instead of, like, you could say teach them to do something or like any other version, but it's like to find an opportunity for what you're wanting to do to be their win.
Yeah.
And like that release into that is a real big thing. And without guys stopping and taking that time to explain something to you and just trying to, you know, like get your horses to match up to everything else around you, like that braciness and stuff that you put in them.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting, like how such a negative effect comes from someone who's truly just trying to like get to that next level
Yeah.
and kind of see what other guys are doing without that type of communication.
I agree. You know, so after the ZX, you know, I had worked for the Padlocks, like I said, and that big outfit.
Was that your next move when you left there?
Yep. You know, I'd always go back to that ranch at home.
Uh-huh.
And I'd always go there. I always could get a job there.
Yep.
And then and I wasn't there very long. So from there, I went to a feed yard down there in Yuma.
Okay.
I worked in Yuma in a feed yard, my first feed yard job, and a guy named Button Sugar, which is a good hand too, good cowboy. I spent a lot of time with him, and I think Button taught me a lot. He did. He taught me a lot about cowboying. We probably didn't, same thing, you know, probably didn't talk a lot about horsemanship back then. I'll get to where I felt like my horsemanship days started, I guess maybe when I got interested in it more. But you know, we could do stuff. He was a hell of a hand. You put him anywhere, I don't care where, you know, he'd make a hand anywhere.
Was when you got down there with him, was it just you and him, or were you guys on a crew?
He had 2 boys. Button run a ranch there in California.
Okay.
And then he's the one that got me. He got me the job in the Valley, or in Yuma.
Okay.
But he had 2 boys that would help him. They were younger than me, and it was just. And then there was a couple other guys around there, Bugs Ponchetti, Steve Tellum. They would help, like when we'd have to ship and stuff. So he'd get them guys to come help. But and they were good hands too.
Yeah.
I mean, those guys they were good.
Was it a bigger culture back then for ranches to share help? It seems like a lot of guys are real sensitive to, if you're on my payroll, you need to be doing something for me. And by God, even if it's your day off, you better not be branding calves for someone else without my permission.
Yeah, you know that place where I worked, that ranch that I called home. The boss there, he got that way a little bit. Like he'd get mad when we'd go help the neighbor, and I was, like I said, I was young and kind of wild and didn't care.
Yeah.
You know, I left. I think I quit him one time because he got mad about something like that, and he ended up hiring me back. You know, but they kind of want to be that way a little bit. But
Yeah.
it's like, hey, they need help, and when we need help, we can call on them. You know, but some people just don't really understand that that's what it takes, you know, to get
Yeah.
stuff done. You got to help each other out.
Yeah, when I was at the Alvord, that was the most friendly community as far as like if Bob next door needs help gathering or branded, you know, he could call one of any 10 ranches and get one or two guys from each one.
Yeah.
And I always wondered why guys would get so kind of bowed up about that type of thing, because everybody knows what it takes to get something operated, and if you can share a little bit of help and take off that cost, you know, because you may be, you know, dealing with them cattle in certain years and prices. I mean, you may be dealing with a big gross number at the end of it, but that net is going to be significantly smaller. And I never understood why guys would kind of cut their own legs out like that. I mean, it's good for everybody. It's good for morale to get to see some new faces, especially in that big desert country. You get so lonely out there.
Oh yeah, it's nice to go help the neighbors. I mean, it's so nice. Yeah, it's pretty good.
So when you moved up to the oh dang it, not the Pitchfork, where did Padlock? When you moved up there, what was that like? How old were you when you made that move?
You know, I must have been 23, probably 22 or 23. I might have been 22 still, the first time I went. And I think I went, and I got that job through Corvin Cooper, which was the cowboy boss at the ZX. They were from that country, and he knew a lot of people up there. So he said, if you ever want to go over there, he said, let me know. So he got me a job over there. And it's just a wagon that runs for 30 days. You know, you go up there, and it's all it is, the Brandon wagon. It's in Montana, actually. The Padlocks, which was the biggest ranch, the biggest family-owned ranch in the West, they said back then, you know, it was big. They had feedlot down there in Ranchester, and then up on the north end was they call it the Connolly, I think the Connolly camp, but they leased it from the Crow Indians up there. So, I mean, we're talking, give you goosebumps when you ride around there, because it's right there by where Custer Battlefield is, and it's pretty neat. I remember one evening we were camped out there, and you could hear drums beating, and they were having one of those ceremonies, you know, where they do the Sundance deal, where they hang them in the deal, and that's what was going on. I asked a few guys what all that commotion was, but you could hear them, and it was a long ways away, but it was just so neat, that country, because there's so much history up there.
And were you out? Well, you're on the wagon, so you're with the crew out on a wagon, and,
Yep.
and hearing this, you're never like out on your own on a camp, just
No.
kind of riding cattle or anything.
No, they'd set up camp. I think they'd set up 4 different times throughout that month. So you'd go up there, and there'd be a camp man at every time we'd go.
Gotcha.
And they would set up. It was funny because, so the first year I went, I had a good recommendation. Like, I got hired, and they'd hire kind of about anybody up there, young guys. And there was about 12, 14 guys on that crew. And there was always probably about, I think there was 2 company men plus the cowboy boss. And then when you'd go to a camp, you'd pick up another guy at that camp. And then when you leave that camp and go to another camp, you'd pick up probably the other guy that had that country and lose that other guy. So I want to say 12 guys. And like I said, they'd hire a lot of kids that didn't know much at all. But I was fortunate enough that when I got hired on, just the year that I spent on the ZX, and you know, I guess my ability was a lot better than what most of them guys were hiring. But so the guys figured out, hey, this guy, you know, he knows a little more than some of these young kids coming in. So I would say they treated me better. They paid me more, for sure. And then, you know, they would let me, so setting up camp, you know, when you got 12 guys, you got the cook tent, all these flies, the cowboy tent, and then a couple guys that set up teepees or whatever. Just a lot of work. I mean, it's a lot of work. So when we'd leave, we set up camp first time, I was like, man, driving stakes, I mean, it was a pain in the butt. So when we leave, they'd have to send 3 or 4 cowboys with the horses, and they'd have a big cavy, you know, 60, 70 head of horses. And the Jack, I can't remember his last name, Jack was the boss up there, and it was pretty cool. He's like, hey, why don't you go ahead and go with the boys and take those 2 other camp guys, and you'd go and take the cavy. So hell, we'd jingle the horses, and it'd take forever, you know, for us to get to the next spot where we were
Yeah.
going to put them. And by the time we'd get there, they'd have camp set up, and I was like, oh man, this is good. But it was kind of nice to be able to not have to do a lot of that work. But it, you know, it was just a deal where you'd set up a camp one, and then you'd brand around there. They'd brand them creeks, them creek bottoms. Very seldom did you ever one day be branded and all of a sudden looking and see a few calves that were already branded. You know, they had it figured out up there. They could do it good and do about 200, 250, maybe sometimes you'd reach 300 head. But they went about it right. Yeah, it was good.
So, to what you had just said about how they kind of, you know, you had maybe a little bit more skill and, you know, got a little bit of advantages from that. Does this tie into what you were saying about how your father instilled such a good work ethic into you?
Yes, for sure.
Were you like noticeably outworking these other younger guys? Because I know when I was young, there was dang sure a window where I was worthless. Like it took a little bit of growing up for me to realize I was doing the wrong thing, and then I kind of got the other side of the coin. But
yeah, you know, my dad, his biggest deal, I always say this about him. My dad, he's cut firewood for a living. He ran a hot shot crew for I think it was Palomar Hot Shots. He's driving a cement truck now, but he's had quite a few different jobs. And I always looked up, and he was the best at it. You know, when he cut wood, he cut the best cord wood that you'd ever see. So I think he instilled that in me. I know he did. And I try to put that into my boys. We want to be the best. If we're going to dig a ditch, it's going to be the best ditch.
absolutely.
So I remember, you know, on that ZX or on that Padlock Ranch, I mean, I roped pretty good when I was younger there. And I mean, I always tried I wanted to be the best hand there. And I worked hard. And I think they seen that, and they were good to me, you know. And that's probably why he let me go jingle the horses and stuff.
I think you just nailed a really big detail, is not just working hard, but working hard to do a good job.
Yes.
I mean, not to just get the job done, but to do it good and to do it right. That, I think, is the most important thing to a lot of these guys. Is you could hire any meathead that's big and strong to pack a shovel, but he's got to be thinking about, where does this shovel need to hit the dirt?
Speaking of that, so I remember we'd always have to dig a hole and throw all the boxes from the vaccines and all the bottles and stuff. We'd throw them in that hole, and then I don't know if we burn them or bury them, but because it was your trash hole basically is what it was. And so when we'd go to move camp every day, it was like this every day. You'd set everything up. It was a lot of work, and so we had to dig a hole. And all the time, hey, boss would tell a couple of them kids, start digging a hole right there. I mean, I'd say, give me that shovel. You know, you guys don't know how to dig a hole. And I mean, I'd bust my butt and I'd dig that hole because I couldn't stand watching them just chip away at it. But I knew how to dig a hole. And there's a lot of people don't know how to dig a hole with a shovel. They just don't. You know, you can tell when you put it in someone's hand if they know what they're doing. But just I think that's in life. You need to work hard at everything you do. The people that are successful in life, and as I got older and started realizing, you know, it took me a while for all that stuff to kick in. I was just a young, wild kid. I mean, I was wild, and I didn't know where I was headed, you know, and all of a sudden I finally think that one day it all kicked in. Well, I was already instilled in me to be a hard worker, and it was easy after that for me because I guess I wasted a lot of years. I did waste a lot of years being wild and just, you know, just not having a care in the world. But I wouldn't really change any of that. I don't think. I might, but and I'd tell my boys not to be that way. I want them to get it figured out as a young man and try to be successful. But I think if you work hard, you know, everything else just comes together better.
Absolutely. When you've mentioned this kind of like wild side of being young and everything. Did your heritage have anything? Did you carry any type of a chip on your shoulder because of it? Did you ever feel like cast aside because of it or anything on any outfits, or were you treated pretty fair?
Not on the outfits.
Just kind of in the world.
Just being a kid growing up, we were different. But as I got older and left home, That's the best thing I could have ever done was leave, because I got around people that were like, hey, you're just like us. You're not different than us.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just, and it was, but a lot of my wildness came from growing up on the reservation. I mean, we had no rules.
Yeah.
You know, the cops never came on the reservation. We could stay out up on the mountain all night long. We used to burn all the time. We'd light fires. We were pyros. We'd burn brush because we cut a lot of firewood. So
Yeah.
we'd burn, and sometimes they'd call the fire department in there, and we kind of just had a free for all. We could do what we wanted up there.
Mm-hmm.
And not many people. We didn't have to have a driver's license. We didn't have to have a hunting license. I mean, we could do whatever we wanted. But that probably is why I was a little on the wild side when I was young, and it took me a while to kind of start settling down and start, you know, deciding, hey, I want to be more of a horseman, and maybe, you know, some of that stuff kind of came into play as I got older. I think I got, you know, so I was at the Padlocks, and then I'd been back and forth to them probably 3 or 4 wagons. But then when
And is this a spring or fall, or is this just every spring you'd go back for a couple of years?
well, I did twice in a row, I think, and then, but I'd come back home and I'd work on that ranch, you know, and then I ended up coming to Texas. That's when I came to Texas for 2 years. I spent in Texas, and that's kind of when I guess I was probably 27 by that, 26, 27. And I'd been getting more involved in team roping as this is going on. The team roping deal started kind of getting more in my, so I wasn't just cowboy now. I got around some guys. So when I was young, you know, I was around a guy. I could rope. I could go catch wild cattle. I could do stuff, but I couldn't. I didn't know how to really. I couldn't swing a rope correct.
It's very unruly when you like I thought that I was relatively good with the rope. I mean, I'd get stuff caught, didn't need help, whatever. And then I'd come in and try and do something in the arena. I mean,
oh yeah,
it destroys your confidence at first.
It's a whole different deal. I was young. I got around a guy. I think I was 16 years old. His name was Hayden Petrie, and he was a handy son of a gun too. He could shoe horses. I mean, he was more like a blacksmith type of horseshoer, good horseshoer, could rope calves good. He was a good hand, and he could play pool real good. I mean, I met him at the bar with my folks, and I got to hanging around him a little bit. So I'd go stay with him sometimes, and he taught me a lot about shoeing horses. That's where I learned how to shoe a horse. And but he showed me how. He goes, hey, we're gonna fix you, and we'd rope the dummy for hours. And I was like, man, I thought I could rope good until finally I got around him, and he kind of created my correct head loop swing, you know, or you know, just kind of the old school way of swinging a rope.
Yeah.
Kind of taught a guy how to feel your rope. So he showed me kind of that. So as I was growing older, you know, I always was team roping quite. I loved team roping, but never could afford the horses. I mean, couldn't afford the entry fees. You know, we were just kind of going along. I had an uncle that would take me to some ropings once in a while, and I'd always borrow a horse. And somebody put me on. A guy named Wayne Bryan. He used to mount me all the time, and that's how I really kind of got more and more involved in roping, because I would have other people were helping me. And but yeah, then, you know, when I left the Padlocks up there, I came home back and forth, and then getting back to going to Texas. I think right about that time I was kind of starting to mature a little bit. You know, I was getting a little more about thinking, hey, I want to learn something. And I worked in a feed yard there, Cattletown feed yard, for quite a while. And then I ended up getting a real good wheat pasture job over there in Dimmitt, Texas. That guy, he seen me at a roping, and he come and tried to get me hired, and he put me to work. It was a great job for a young man, because you got to rope a lot. You know, we're doctoring wheat pasture. You had a bunch of cattle on wheat. So that was a good deal. And I started getting around some guys that maybe like a guy named Bobby Crossland. He probably was the first guy that I'd ever got around that I really respected his horsemanship, to the point where I just was like, help me. Well, then, you know, you talk about working and not being able to stop and go over stuff. You know, it was a small crew. It was him and I, basically, and maybe another guy on wheat or shipping or whatever. He'd pull me up and say, hey, hold on a second, you know, try this. And that's when I started getting more and more involved in the horsemanship. So
And did he do anything besides just like ranch, or was he showing any horses
Nope.
or anything like that?
He just cowboy. Yeah, he worked for a bunch of them ranches out here. I mean, he's been everywhere out here in West Texas. Everybody knows him, and he was one of them guys that, you know, he just was a guy that I looked up to as a horseman, and I learned a lot, I guess, through him. I kind of quit thumping on him and quit, asking so much, and started just getting along. And then I went back to the paddock again. And then I think when I went back, that might have been the last time I took a load of horses with me.
Is this the first time you'd gone with
horses.
your own set of horses?
Yep. And they were good to me up there, good enough. Like I said, those guys were good. They said, hey, if you got some stuff that you want to sell, bring them. And maybe when we're done, we'll buy them back. So everything I took, I think I took 4 head up there. And, I was getting to the point where now I could afford. I had a guy in California, that Slim Hart. He would send me whatever I needed and say, hey, just pay me when you sell them. So it was good. But I got up there and I showed him some good horses. And now I'm trying to make a product that somebody else would like to buy.
Absolutely.
So I had to kind of get these horses ready. And I think that was when I kind of started changing over from just trying to make something somebody else would appreciate, and not just something that I could get by on.
Were you ever real worried about making them super gentle for yourself, or just being easy to be around? Was that something that you really had to change on the ground before you even could get onto them to add to your deal, or did you already kind of appreciate a horse that didn't mind having you on top of them?
No, I had to learn how to do that. I mean, my horses were always the snortiest ones, and I didn't care. It didn't bother me a bit. But as I, got older and started making, let's say, rope horses, and to where we are kind of now, or where we have been in the past 15 to 20 years, I guess, that's when I was like, we got to make this horse gentle on the ground to where, the public can get around him, because you could have a perfect rope horse that somebody can get along real good with once they get on his back. But all the other BS that goes along with it, saddling him and loading him in a trailer and all that stuff, if there's a quirk, it might queer the deal. It might be a deal where they're going to say, you know what, nah, I don't want to deal with that. And I get it now. I get it. I agree with all of that today. I think that why not? Why not start from the ground and make them gentle and make them easy, and then make them good to rope on? Because before, I did not care.
Yeah.
I didn't care if you had to cheek one around and get on him, or once you were on him, he was good, but I didn't care if he sat back or whatever. And a lot of them cowboys didn't care. They didn't. They were fine with it. We thought it was funny, Today it's different.
Yeah.
It's different.
And it's almost a necessity to have that kind of quality with a horse now, because there are just so, especially in Texas and Oklahoma, there are just so many good ones. Why bother with a piss head?
Yep.
It completely eliminates yourself.
It's amazing. Texas is so far, I think. Texas is, you got to admit, they're ahead of the world when it comes to horses.
Absolutely.
And when I got here, I was used to, just kind of whatever. And don't get me wrong, I've had some good horses before I come here. All the horses, once I kind of got old enough to where, when I left Texas, when I was first in Texas, that was back when I was probably it was in 92 that was pretty much when I quit traveling, quit going out. And so I left Texas, and I was here for 2 years, 93, maybe somewhere in there. That's when I went back and my life started changing as far as the horsemanship goes. But, so I went back and did what I did. But saying right now, getting back here, they're so far advanced as far as the horses are. They're just, they don't get no better than around here. And that's why we're here. But when I left Texas and went back, that's pretty much when I started staying home. I had a good ranch job. I got another ranch job not far from where home was. A guy named Howard Smithers. He was like a second dad to me, and it was perfect time in my life. I needed a guy like him in my life. He was just a professional. He bought and sold a lot of cattle, and he loved me. Howard was like my dad, and I think my life started changing a lot when he was always creased up, he was an auctioneer. I mean, he was a well-rounded guy. You know, he was a true believer, you know, and a Christian man that just maybe showed me that, hey, you know, this is the better way to kind of live. And so I worked for him for 6, 7, 8 years, I guess. It's been a while.
That's a good
Yeah.
stretch, especially cowboy. And like a lot of
Yeah.
people that don't go around and like, there's a lot of cowboys that maybe don't ever like leave home and go
Yeah.
see big country and stuff. And then there's this whole other world of cowboying of guys that did probably stuff similar to like what it feels like you and me did, where, you know, we may be here for a season and then maybe a couple of years here seems like a big deal, and then 6 months over
Yep.
here. So for a guy to be so good to you and like mean something and show you a path that you stick around for
Yes.
5, 6, 7, 8 years cowboying,
yeah.
like that is a huge feat. I mean, that's a career in any other industry.
Well, it was our relationship was good enough to where, you know, I was by then I'd gotten to be pretty handy. You know, I could pull a calf out. I was good with the cattle. His death loss went to virtually nothing. You know, I mean, I was tending to his cattle. He took care of me on the other hand. I mean, he let me. I remember he had a barn there, and I mean, I had too many horses there all the time. You know, I'd take on outside horses, and he'd cringe every time I'd tell him to send a load of hay, but he just kept sending it, and he knew I was tending to that like it was mine. Well, as he got older and stuff, we knew that I'd had the conversation with his wife Mildred. I said, you know, what's going to happen when Howard's done? Like, what do you guys think? She goes, well, I think that you should take this deal over. It was a great lease. Run about 200 pairs on it. It was a good one there in Southern California. And I said, okay. She goes, we'll figure out a way. We'll finance you the cows. And I was just a cowboy at that point. I thought, how can I ever own a cow? You know, I mean, I had a few cows, but so this deal was coming. I knew it was coming. I knew I was going to get it. And then I talked to the people that own the ranch one time, and I said, hey, what's your thoughts of, you know, what's going to happen when Howard's done? And they said, you know, we're just going to roll you right in. That's our plan. So I had something to look forward to. I was like, okay, this is all my life. I've just wanted this, and now I'm going to get there. Well, after 6 years, I was there. Howard been there, I think, 30 years, and they got crossways, and it split up. Called the trucks, shipped the cows, and now I'm sitting here like, well, that's when I started building fence. At that point, I kept roping all the time, but that's when I thought I got to make a living. I had to scratch out a living, and you know, it's time to go ahead and do something. So I went to building fence, and I think I was probably, I'll bet you it was that was probably 20, 22, 25 years ago, and that's when I quit. You know, I quit traveling around
And so you're early 30s somewhere,
Yeah.
about like that?
Yep. Went to building fence, right there, kind of north of where I grew up, there in the town of Temecula. And I'll tell you what, if you want to move on to that now, I mean, that's where my dad comes into play again. You know, I didn't know anything about. I could build barbed wire fence. Been on a ranch all my life. I couldn't weld. I mean, I went to high school and learned how to weld a little bit, but I was always intrigued with corrals.
Yeah.
I mean, you know how it is. You working on ranches, you see corrals, and you're like, oh, that's cool. That's a cool setup. You
Yeah.
go to another ranch and you see. But I was always intrigued in that. I always wanted to kind of build that kind of stuff. So I was self-taught. I taught myself to weld, taught myself how to lay them out, and I already kind of knew how one should work because I'd worked in them all my life. And I went to building fence, and I was, in my eyes, I wanted to be the best fence builder in the country, and I always did that. I always made sure it was to go the extra mile. And I think, like I said, that comes from the way I was raised, and it blew up. I mean, it got to where I was not afraid to work. I loved it. When I got up in the morning, I ran out the door to go to work. So it was a different deal for me now, and I was like, okay, it's good, and this is what we're going to do, and that's what I do today. And I still, you can ask my wife. I tell her all the time. I love building fence. I dream about it sometimes. Still, I'll wake up thinking, what is wrong with you? You're dreaming about building a fence. You know, I enjoy it. I'm fortunate.
It seems like a lot of these qualities that were put into you at a young age about attention to detail and like doing a good job on something and being able to work hard and do that. You hear a lot now about, or at least I do now that I'm looking to hear this type of information, about giving a more value than what you're getting paid.
Yeah.
Or at least convincing them that there's something about that. And like whether that is, the details on an overhead or something kind of fancier, a handier kind of latch or some sort of angle that makes it so it don't get hung up or greased on and stuff like that. And all those kind of small nuances and stuff like that really make a big difference. And did you take advantage of knowing that because you enjoyed it, like those kind of more intricate designs on certain things, was that something that you would press into people or just do even without asking if you knew it was functional for what they wanted to kind of increase that value or that perceived value in what they were spending on you?
Yeah, I would, in the earlier years I was building fence, I didn't really push it maybe too much, but then as I got a little older and started knowing, I was very strong in my business. I knew, I could stick my chest out and say, hey, I'm your guy. Don't worry about it. I got you. And, I got to see certain customers, at first they want to micromanage you and make sure you put every gate where so I built Bob Avila's place and California, and Bob could have had Prefert put all his stuff up. He was sponsored by all them, and I got to know him out there, and we'll talk a little more about Bob later, but he's passed away now, but he was another good guy that I was around. And but anyway, I started building his place, and I started asking him. He's like, build it, just build it. You don't have to ask me. He goes, I believe in you and I trust you. Build it how you want to build it. And it was like, okay. I wasn't really, I built stuff for people, but most of the time I was always, and I think a lot of that was maybe the way I was raised on the reservation. I was I was a little bit not real forward about telling somebody what they needed. It's like turning in a bill. I mean, I had a hard time billing people.
Yeah.
I grew up poor. We didn't have no money. So when I have a bill, I was like, can you pay this? When I needed money, I'd have to, almost like I waited till the last minute to ask for a check.
Yeah.
And, so I was used to a lot of people saying, telling me kind of how they wanted it done, and I'd do it. But Bob was one of the first guys that was like, hey, you build it like you want to build it. And man, we did. And I built the second place for him in Arizona. Same thing. So I could go ahead and just put in a little trickier setup to where my work stood out more.
Yeah.
And take a little more time and do it. So I think that sells too.
What in the first couple of years that you're doing this business, you said like you finally were kind of like stepping up and puffing your chest a little bit, not arrogantly, but saying, hey, like you should pick me. I am gonna do you a good job.
Yep.
And that kind of confidence, I don't think it matters what you're doing, whether you're the crossing guard in front of the school or you're a horse trainer or anything where there is a pool of other people that do the same thing that you do, to have and find that confidence.
Yep.
What was it that gave that to you? Was it just enough hours and finally like cutting off kind of those rough edges and getting rid of some of the waste in time and material? Or was there something or a compliment from someone, or did someone have to like kind of like grab you and shake you and say, hey, sucker, you do a good job, start telling people?
Yep. Fortunately, around Temecula, California. So when I started building fence, I was the only guy that could build pipe fence.
Okay.
I mean, there was a couple guys around there that did a little bit of it, but they weren't serious. I had a crew. I mean, I built myself a crew. I had always 4 or 5 good hands, and I taught them how to do it, And they stayed with everybody that usually worked for me for a long time. I was lucky. So I had no competition, zero. And so I could charge what I wanted to charge, and it wasn't like they were going to get a bid from somebody else. So I could, in doing that, and instilled in my life was always do a good job. When you can charge a little more money and get more money, you stay on the job a little longer. You'll clean it up better. You'll go back and grind some welds, or when somebody pays a bunch of money for a project that you're doing for them, every single time you give them an estimate, it's always more than they expected, always in fencing. They're like, dang, I didn't think it was going to cost that much. But the people that finally start looking up and going, hey, this guy, he's not going to do a shoddy job. It's going to be good. So those people they got to where it was like, they didn't care. Well, I would see a lot of guys from Paso Robles were fence builders up there. I got around a guy that taught me how to build fence a lot, Claude Stallings. He was a good fence builder, good hand too, good cowboy. He'd do a lot of good things. So he showed me a lot in the fencing. But those guys would haul pipe down to us from Paso, and finally they started telling me, they're like, hey, you guys are like bad cats. He goes, you guys, your fence is straight. You lay it out good. There's no comparison. I'm like, really? Because there's a lot of these guys up there around Paso. They're like, yeah, there's some good guys up there. But he goes, I've heard it from 3 or 4 other drivers or whatever. That's when I started realizing, and I kind of always knew that I did good work because I'd been around and seen it too. But I could look at it and go, hey, we got something that's better than everybody else's. Till this day, I still, that's what I put into my guys. And I got to the point where like estimating was hard for me because, man, I would give a price and I'd be like, I never was confident in myself enough to be able to, I always felt bad all the time. Like I said, the way I grew up, no money, but finally, getting back to the question of when I started, I don't know, I just kind of matured finally, and I got to the point where people had told me that I did good work enough, and I knew that I did, that finally I just got to where it was not easy to do. I got to work around a bunch of other guys that were college educated construction guys, and they kind of taught me more. Like, they're like, hey, you got to bid it, put your number down there. It doesn't matter if we get it or not. And I used to always think, man, I got to get this job. I got to get this job. Now, if I get it, good. If I don't, it's not the end of the world. There's nothing wrong with a guy saying, you know what, Dan, you're too high. You're too high, and I'm going to use this guy. And like, that's good. That guy needs to work too. And I'm okay with that. I really would like to do your job, and I think if I did it, it's going to look better than somebody else that does it. And maybe not, but I'm going to treat it like it's mine.
Absolutely.
So some people will pay extra for that, and other people don't want to, and it doesn't make it a bad deal. There's other deals that we'll do somewhere else. But that's when I started getting very confident in my work.
Do you think that your maturity coming a little bit later and taking age to find your stride in this contracting side of things now versus cowboying? Like, I know for me, cowboying, like, there was a lot of drinking involved in my cowboying. Like, it was primarily that. I thought that's what cowboys were supposed to do, was drink and be the fun guy around. And so, like, when I finally started to get a clue, and this just kind of happened for me about 2 years ago now, 2.5, 3 years now, I felt like when I stepped out of that, I started kind of getting in real heavy and running with it about 15, 16.
Yeah.
And I woke up on the other side, and I was 24. And in my head, I was still a 15-year-old kid, like, mentally.
Sure.
And sometimes I still don't realize now I just turned 27, and it's like there are some guys that are 21 and are men.
Oh yeah.
And there are other guys that are 45 and are still boys. And so I find these little like moments where I'm starting to like connect the dots, and I certainly carry myself a lot different now. But I felt like I was behind the ball that way just because for so long I wasn't looking to be anything more than just that, that dumb cowboy running around that was a good time to hang out with or whatever. Was that something where you kind of had to like kind of slap yourself and wake up? I don't know. You maybe had a different experience, but I know a lot of cowboys kind of run into that when they move on to the real world and say like, hey, I am 30 or I am, whatever age, and I need to act like it and to learn how to carry yourself that way. Was that something that you run into?
Oh yeah, definitely. And I'm glad you asked that question because I wanted to talk about that some. So yeah, I was that guy, till I was probably 35. I might have been somewhere around there, And but I didn't I like to have fun, you know, and I let a lot of that stuff hold me down. I mean, it if you think about it, like I said, I don't know that I'd ever change any of it because I did have a lot of fun, but I didn't raise my boys that way. I've got Spud's 22 and he's a man. I mean, he is. I'm so proud of him. You know, I've had conversations with him and I said, you know, I'm not telling you not to be like me, but try to figure this stuff out when you're young because I wasted a lot of my years, and I don't say waste because like I said, I had great times with some good guys. And but if I would have got serious about it sooner, in whatever I did, whatever I chose, it could have been anything. I think I'd have been so much more successful. But you know, he's I can see that he knows. And then Waylon, you know, I'm raising him that way, and so I want them to not let that be such an important thing to do as having fun and more of just getting serious about working. So I did. It hindered me for a long time, and then finally, you know, when Brady and I got married, or before we've been together for a long time, so I kind of started figuring out, hey, I need to kind of get serious about life, and you know, we were young and making horses, and I always team roped all the time, and team roping been good to me because you get to be around some pretty good folks, and whatever you put out in team roping is what you're going to get back. You can sit here and pretend like you look yourself in the mirror and tell yourself you're a bad cat, but if you don't work at it, they're going to take your money. You know, it's just something that you have to work hard at to get success from it. And that started coming to me after I seriously got, I'm not going to say sobered up because I still like to have a beer, but I definitely got more serious about not drinking and having such a wild time all the time.
Did that come with fatherhood, or did you find that before kids? Because for me, I don't think I would have ever stopped if I didn't have to.
I'm going to say it probably came with fatherhood. I know it came with fatherhood. When Spud was born, my life changed. I had to change my life, and I did. I did it. I think he saved my life. I'll really be honest with you, and I'm grateful for it. I'm just like, should have had him a long time ago.
Yeah.
You know. But here's the thing: is things come to you in your life at the right times. You know, and I feel like, you know, it all fell into place, and where I'm at today is I couldn't be in a better spot.
Yeah.
You know, and all the steps that I had to go through to get to it. You know, sometimes you look back and think, man, it was rough, but it was supposed to be that way, I
Yeah,
guess.
absolutely. That's it's. I'm gonna try not to get like too like soppy about the whole deal,
Yeah.
but what you just said about how your first son maybe saved your life. You know, I swear to God, just yesterday, Gracie was taking a nap on the couch, and I took Ace outside, and I've got one of them little Smarty dummies on wheels,
Yeah.
and he'll push that thing around the yard for me, and we'll rope it. And I don't know why, I just kind of like had a second. I just kind of scooped him up and just kind of, he's just looking at me, just square in the face. And you know, kids are, some they're just wiggly and they want down. But he just took a second. He just looked at me.
Yeah.
And I mean, I just sat there right out loud, and I said, I don't know if you saved my life, but you damn sure changed it and put it on the track it needed to be on. And the same with his mother. I mean,
Yeah.
I didn't know I needed it in my, I thought I was having a good life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now that I have this version of it now, and I didn't realize how empty it was before that.
Yes.
Like how just such a shell around nothing, really.
Yeah. And you know, now I look at myself as, you know, I want to be this guy, let's say, that people look up and say, you know, here's this guy that has been successful at this or he's been successful at that. And when we're around him, he's fun, he's good, he's positive, he's this guy. But now I look at myself like this team. You know, it's not this guy no more. I feel like it's me, my wife, Brady, Spud, and Waylon. Even though Spud, you know, he's off working for somebody else. I feel like I want them to look at our team, because we help each other out. We work together. We're trying to build, you know, a horse program or make rope horses. Whenever we show up, it's like I want everybody to say that great family. You know, that's that's all I ever look for now anymore. I want to make sure that we are well respected and well rounded to where people like seeing all of us there. And I mean, I don't see how it can get much better than that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So as you start going through all your contracting and everything, you've got to, I mean, you mentioned Bob Avila right off the bat, which I mean, that's a big person you get to run into and be around and build a relationship with, building two places for him. I'm assuming you guys got to be fairly close.
Yeah.
Was that a common theme through your career? Were you able to like create some of those lifelong relationships that come out of that and people you still get to run around and rope with or help with that have kind of like, did you ever get to go to Bob and ride with him ever at any of these places you built for him and kind of get some help that way from people?
Yeah. He, you know, he lived pretty close to us, so we always had an open invitation to go to his place all the time. But he, you know, one thing about Bob, like Bob, he was so good to me. Like he respected me, and I remember just wondering why he was. I mean, they'd have a party, and he'd have a party, and he'd call me and say, "Hey, we want you and your family to come to this party." So we're expecting Brady. It was like a swimming party or something. She's like, "Man, I wonder who all is going to be there." You know, we'd get down there. There'd be five families there. You know, it was just like he was so humble that he didn't have to have a bunch of people around, but he invited us, and I thought, man, this guy. But I was good to him as far as, you know, when I worked for him. He was good to me, and I think he liked me a lot, and that I looked up to him so much that he was so good to me, I guess. I remember we were in Arizona one time, and I was building that place, and he called me and he said, "Hey, we're gonna go for a drive out on the desert in this side by side." And there was a guy from Texas, I can't remember his name, but he was I think he owned one of these big vet deals down here, and he was there. And Bob, I went to go get something to drink, a beer, whatever. Bob was going to make us a drink, and we're all going to jump in and go. And I remember they walked in the barn, and I was on the outside of the barn going somewhere to do something, and I can remember that guy asking Bob, "Well, who's this guy?" You know, I'm the fence guy. And Bob, I could hear him. He goes, "He's a good man." He said, "He's a good friend of mine." And he didn't know I could even hear him, but that day I was like, I guess I am somebody. You know, he made me feel good. And he did that to a lot of people, though. I think he was one of the kind of guys. But you know him, I worked with. So you go through life, you get around guys like that, and I think they mold you into the guy that you're supposed to become. Like that guy I talked about, Howard Smithers, my dad, you know, my uncles. I got to work for, you know, I've done work for people that are successful. Donnie Bricker, Tanya Jenkins, all these cow horse reiners. Andre Fapani, built a lot of stuff for him. So I got to see how they operated and see what they did, and got to know them pretty good. And I think that helped me a lot. It helped me a lot just knowing where I was headed. And you know, the good men in my life, I feel like are what made me who I am today. My dad was always good about letting me go. He'd send me when I was Waylon's age, you know, go with my uncles. He wouldn't just not let me go because he's worried I was going to get hurt or learn a new cuss word or whatever. You know, he go ahead. And that to me, I think that's what I've done with my boys. I've raised them that way to where, you know, when we first come to this country, Spud was probably, I don't know, 15, 16 years old, and I sent him with you get to know people around here, and you know it was hard because when we first come here, Brady was like, "Man, are we going to fit in?" When we found this place, we'd been looking for a place in Texas for, you know, 2-3 years, and when we drove in the driveway, we knew this was home for us. We knew it. It was like where we're supposed to be, and you know, we got to be around the locals around here. We were lucky enough. One of the first guys I met was Lloyd South, and he's like the godfather of team roping around here, and he well respected. I mean, you know, when you got him on your side, everybody's like, "Oh, these people must be pretty good." And even though we're from California, you know, and you got that persona of everybody saying that, well, Lloyd wasn't going to let him badmouth us. He was, and if they did, he'd either fight you, and if not, he had a knife in his pocket, and if that didn't work, I bet the pistol in his boot would work. But he's a good guy, and having him on your side was always good. We just, you get lucky and you find these people that you run into and you meet. Our neighbors down the road, we got to rope with them. They got a roping arena, the Rices there, and Waylon got to be friends with their son, and baseball, Robert coached him. I mean, we fell into the community around here, and then that helps your business too, because people, the roping deal was a lot too. When you're around people at the ropings, they're like, oh, what do you do? We build fence. Okay. You go to work for some of those guys. But getting back to the boys, Spud, so you get around, and I'm cowboy, and you know this too. So when you get around places, you know who the hands are. You can see it, you can tell. You can tell them guys are handy, and they're not just, most of the good hands aren't just handy horseback or rope. They're good guys. They're good guys on top of that. So I got to meet a good buddy of mine, Waylon Davis. I'd run into him a few times, and I knew, I thought, this guy, he's a little different than the rest of the people out here. So got to know him. We got to be good friends. In fact, he's probably one of the better friends I've met out here. We talk a lot. I'm like, perfect. Send Spud with him. He's gonna help him. He's gonna teach him. Not so much being a cowboy, but he's gonna help me make him a man. And that's what my dad did to me. I feel like I can send him with those kind of guys, and it helped Spud a lot. And Spud's I think he's going to be successful. He's on his own, but he's still getting to go help different guys. He works for that Cody Porterfield, another good guy. I mean, they're good people. When you're around those kind of people, you learn to be good. Waylon, same way. My little Waylon, I send him same way. We got another friend down the road, Nathan Carter, Ellison Carter. They're big time. They sell a lot of cattle. Just always a horseback. Just a good person. His family's great. He's got daughters. I mean, we're all and him and Waylon have been best friends for since they were kids, Waylon Davis. So we get around those kind of people, and they all of a sudden they accept you, and they're like, hey, they're just like us. They're just from a different part of the world, and you can relate to them, and then pretty soon you find your groove, and it's like they're helpful, and they need us. We'll do whatever. You start getting in the right spot is what, and we've dug our hole in here, and we're here now.
Yeah.
And it's pretty easy, as far as trying to live and support your life the way you want to do it, as far as making a living. And that's how I think it's supposed to be. I think you gotta let your kids go help other people that are going to help them.
Yeah, and so this is something that you had said to me on the phone, I think maybe the first time when I was trying to set this up, and I have it wrote down. You talked about, and I think we even mentioned it here at the beginning, so I'm just trying to remember exactly kind of what it was. You had said that when it wasn't you doing it, or competing or in the circle, and any that's the example maybe is the it's me in the winning circle or blah blah blah, and then it's going to be my kids coming up right behind me.
Oh yeah.
To keep that motivation, because I'm sure running your fencing company and especially having a bigger crew and multiple projects and big projects and stuff, it could have been very easy to get sucked into that and get burnt out on it and not do it for yourself.
Yeah.
It's like the farrier always has the worst looking feet on a horse of it. You know what I mean? It's the same kind of idea.
Oh yeah.
That type of motivation to keep it for yourself and your kids, and to force yourself to find the time to do it and to still do good at that.
Yeah.
While trying to do quality work. And I've built a little bit of fence and stuff. Like, I understand, like, it can be long days, and
Oh yeah.
to then come home and put in the effort on whatever you have. Aside from, like, everybody knows, like, the lifestyle and the people and stuff, but is there something else to it that just really motivated it for you and your family, or an importance in it, or just a type of living that really drove that home to where, like, you're like, I need my family to be involved in this?
Yeah, that's where my wife will come into play. Brady, she's always loved the horses, and she she grew up a lot like me. She grew up a lot like I did. I mean, grew up without for quite a while, and really appreciates, having things nowadays. But I mean, when I'd be out working, she'd have stuff ready when I come home, and she would, like Spud, she would have Spud a horseback all the time. It's like, it's kids say they want to ride, but if they have to ride, it's different. You got to ride. So she's got him saddled, and he's little, and I mean, he's a horseback every day. And if it wasn't for her, I don't feel like I would be able to go saddle his horse every day. And so then when I'd get home, we're roping every day. I've had an arena, and she ropes good, and so Spud ropes good. That's just what we did. And I feel like it took me away from my work enough to where when I'd come home, I'd be like, oh yeah, breath of fresh air. Don't get me wrong, I like my job, but all of a sudden now we get to ride horses, and we get to use our ability to make a good horse, and we get to learn a lot together. And we didn't need anybody. We really didn't need anybody to rope, because it was us. Spud healed for us, and then now Waylon. I mean, I've been lucky enough to where when you want to make a rope horse, you got to have somebody heel or head. You need either go somewhere or have somebody come over. Well, we didn't ever need to. We always, I could spin, Spud. We'd run 6, 7 head horses. He'd ride 3 or 4 heel horses, and we could just rope all we wanted. And then when he moved out, it started changing a little bit, because all of a sudden now it's like, well, we got to call people to come, and sometimes people just can't get over there or over here. But Waylon now, he's getting big enough to where, heck, we got him, but I think my wife has been basically our horse success is probably comes from her, because it's such a passion to her. She takes so good care. Everywhere we go rope, we have people compliment. Like, you've seen that horse. She takes good care of them. She's very proud of them. There's not a horse here that doesn't get taken care of. And she's passionate about it. And she's very proud when we sell a horse for a lot of money. And I think that keeps me, thinking about it all the time, because it's easy to say, heck, he's all right, or we don't need to give him a bath or whatever. But she's handy. I mean, she's handy. She takes all them good horses that I've got or that I've sold. She started all of them, and I literally wouldn't get on them until maybe they were 3, 4-year-olds, and it would be like, oh, this is going to be easy. And I would ride them, and heck, I'd take them to the next level. And then all of a sudden, I'd get one kind of doing something bad. We'd swap out again. She'd go back to riding them. And the next thing you know, 6, 7 years, we might have a 6-year-old that was been swapped back and forth from her and I several times, and now we've got something. And I think that's what it takes. For me, it takes that, because I ask them for more than she does, and she asks them for less in a different way, and that combination, that's been great for us.
I was gonna say, like, going back to like what I'd mentioned earlier about having a horse that you could easily hand off to the public and let someone else step on, having 2 different styles of people riding the same horse, and for a longer duration of time, and being able to add that, like you just said, I'm gonna maybe ask and step them up and make them really push this edge, and she's gonna take them back and ride a little bit different and give them, maybe a little easier opportunity to find that like mental victory, and to just keep hitting that boundary. That's something that me and my boss talk about all the time, riding horses, is to, bump them, find that threshold where things start to get a little squirrely.
Yep.
And then before it really breaks in 2, come back down, and then just kind of up and bump and level them down. And especially having, 2 people riding them, and especially different builds. Like, even just like me riding behind my boss, he's, 7 foot tall. I mean, he's huge.
Yeah.
And he reached down and he'll grab a hold of him under the belly, and I'm like a little kid up there. I'm poking him on top of the ribs.
Yep.
Like, just having that little different feel, I mean, must have made a world of difference in the way your horses rode.
Yep.
And being user-friendly going out the door to someone else.
Guaranteed. Yep. Guaranteed.
So now that we're kind of relatively caught up, is there anything else in that kind of like timeline to where we are now that you think is of importance, or can we kind of get into some more questions?
Yeah, I think we can get into some more questions.
Okay. So right off the bat, I know that you told me, and we've talked on the phone about this horse you just sold, but you've had 2 horses that have made it to the NFR. And so I'd like to kind of get into that and starting off with the first one or two. I think you said the first two kind of went the same year, didn't they?
Yeah, pretty close. One went, and then 1 year, and I think the next year they were both there.
Okay, I see.
Yep.
So how did that come up as far as, I mean, to get a horse to that high of a level, like where did you get the recognition? Where were the connections? What made that horse that quality?
You know, so I mean, I've rodeoed in California at circuit rodeos and jackpot team roper, all my life. So I kind of been around a lot of these guys most of the time, seen them at the rodeos, and I've always been fortunate that I've always been on a good horse. I've always rode good horses, and usually it's something that I've always made. I can think back on when I'd go to the rodeos, I'd had a lot of them guys come up and compliment me or say, "Hey, would that horse be for sale?" This has been, I'm talking when I first started really seriously roping, 25 years ago maybe. I've been fortunate to have some good head horses, and so I think some of the recognition comes from them guys knowing that you've been out there going at it, kind of with them a little bit.
Yeah.
At least the pro guys, But so we're putting in the work all this time, and then always had some really good quality horses, so they see you out there. But then, when I got with Brady is when we really started maybe be interested in selling some horses to some people, and we started, selling a few, maybe not open type of horses, but just good quality, good turnout, good horses for good guys. But I got a horse from Blaine Lineweaver, which him and I are good buddies too, and I rodeoed with Blaine, and this horse Blaine done a heck of a job with this horse. This horse should have been fried, but Blaine, he stayed hooked, got him kind of through a bunch of stuff, and then but the horse had some issues still, and then he got to where Blaine wasn't getting along with the horse, and he sold him. Well, I rode him for a while, and he knew I could get along with him. So that horse, they called him Friendly, and I had him for a long time, probably 6 years, I guess, before I sold him, and I tried to sell him to Chad Masters one time. I was like, man, this horse needs to go with somebody. He's just too much horse for me. Not too much horse for me, but I'm wasting him here. He needs to go. I've got a lot of other colts, and Chad, he didn't buy him. And a couple, 2-3 years went by, I guess. And I've always liked Chad. He's been one of them kind of guys that's just, he's world champion. And every time I remember seeing him at Salinas there in California, we were at the rodeo. I remember getting up early in the morning, and we'd drink and party at Salinas. It was a fun time, right? So most guys were sleeping in all the time. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to get up early. I'm going to be out on that track. It's kind of foggy. I'm going to get out there, and I'm going to be the first guy out there loping around. I'm pulling in to go get my horse, and it's dark, and I look up, and I'm like, there's somebody already on the track. And Chad's ponying one and riding one, and but anyway, getting back to Friendly and Chad, I always felt like that horse would fit him. And I think about my horses sometimes when I know they're good, when they hit the open caliber. I always think, who could fit that horse and get more, maybe more out of him, and I'm pretty good about that. I'm pretty good about saying so and so would ride him good. Well, finally I took him back over there, or called Chad one day and said, hey, I need to sell this horse. He's beating up my barn. He's just a pain in the butt, and he peels his shoes off if you turn him out. I'm not getting to ride him enough. I had other horses that I was riding and just didn't need him. And finally he's like, okay, I need him. And he took him. And I mean, it was just, he made the finals again that year. He rode him at the NFR. I think he placed in quite a few rounds on him, but he wished he would have bought him the first time. And so do I. But he was very successful on that horse. Since then, that horse was sold, I think, to, I think Luke Brown had him a while, and then now Jake Smith. He ended up with that horse last year, and that horse helped Jake Smith make the finals. If you ask Jake, that's why he made the finals, probably because the winter rodeos, they were winning big rodeos and placing good. And so, I have to give Blaine credit for that, because Blaine was the first guy that I thought that did a good job with him. But then I just rounded him up, got him kind of where he was that much better. But So he went that, I think that first year maybe, or maybe it was the same year. So we had Spud had a horse here, and Spud had a horse here that he got from Bob Avila. We got from Bob. It was a good horse. And one day Waylon Davis, he was over here, and like I said, he always come rope. We're buddies. And it was on a Sunday. He's like, we ought to just do some trading today. And I don't know if he was trying to get this horse from us. You know, I've never really asked him, but it doesn't matter. And Spud wasn't getting along with this horse very good anyway, and this was a good horse. And I remember Waylon riding him and saying, hey, this might be one of the, you know, Waylon rides lots of horses. I mean, he's a hell of a hand. And he said, this might be one of the brokest sunbucks I ever rode, you know. Well, Bob Avila rode him, you know, he should be. But long story short, they traded. They done some trading, big time trading going on out here. I mean, it was, I'll trade you this horse for that one, plus I want to be half owners in this one. So Spud, you know, he ends up getting a horse Waylon called Kid Rock. And he was pretty bronky and pretty green. Waylon would take him to some ropings too, but, you know, and get by on him. But Waylon's got all kinds of horses, so it's not like he's just focusing on him. And so Spud got that horse and rode him for, I think, a year. And Spud would ride horses with Waylon all the time. That horse, Cap Gun, Waylon sold to Wesley Thorpe. That horse was sold right here in this arena too. Wes came over. Wesley seen Spud ride him they seen Spud ride him at the Junior BFI, and that kind of got the ball rolling. And Waylon sold that horse for Bunch right here to Wesley. Wesley took him to the finals. So that we had something to do with that a little bit, you know. And then anyway, so Waylon and Spud, they trade, and Spud's got that Kid Rock, and he's riding him, and Waylon takes the other horse, and he goes to winning ranch horse deals on him, and it's just everything's good, you know. I see Paul Eves at the fence store, and he was asking me about, because the Cap Gun deal was kind of, everybody was talking about how Wesley had that horse, and he goes, hey, you're good friends with Waylon, aren't you? And I go, yeah. He goes, what else has he got over there? And I said, man, you know, this had been a year after Spud had done the trade with him. I go, he's got one other one over there. They call him Skits, but he's that's why they call him that. I go, you don't want him. Well, Paul, he's like, man, I want to try him. And I'm like, no, Paul, this horse ain't gonna work for you. Well, we kind of laughed about it, and Waylon's like, well, hell, if he wants to try him. So here comes Paul. He tries the horse. It doesn't work out. But Paul comes up to me and he goes, hey, what about that one Spud's on? He goes, would you sell him? And I said, well, you got to ask Spud that. So Spud reared back and priced that horse pretty high to where I didn't think Paul would want to buy him. And Paul says, well, I'll tell you what, Spud, if that's a lot of money, if he's as good as my good one, I'll buy him. Bring him tomorrow to the house. And I think Coy Rallman was over there. Spud told me that they went full contact on about 15, 18 steers, and said, man, it was amazing. Boom, he buys him. Paul rode that horse. I mean, they beat him up everywhere on him. So I think when Paul was riding that horse, I think he was roping with Chad at first. I'm pretty sure. And they roped. I think they roped together at some rodeos on those two horses. But they both made the finals. And I mean, I'm not sure that you won't see those horses there again. I don't know if Paul's going to go that hard, but Jake probably ought to make the finals again. But I mean, it's just at Houston, I think they were both in the short round at Houston. I was very proud of that.
So that's one thing I've been thinking this whole time is I don't know that right now that I'd be humble enough to say I think someone else could take this horse farther than me, or even if I thought they could, I'd say, well, maybe if I keep them, it'll help get me farther. You know, I'd maybe be more selfish about that. So how did you find that sense of humility to pass that horse on, or even like have that train of thought? Like, was it like, and beyond, I mean, was it just a big check and I mean, hard to say no to, or was it because you know you're trying to build a program or at the time, or was that kind of what inspired you to start trying to build a horse program? Or
yeah, I'm glad you asked that question, because that to me is very important. You got to be humble enough. Like, let's say that, you know, I just sold one. The check ought to clear tomorrow. It'll be a done deal. Same deal. We'll talk about him in a minute. But so, and we're gonna probably see him at the NFR too. But so you got to be humble enough, like Waylon. So Waylon sold that horse to Spud, and he's he had a lot to do with what the horse is today. Well, Spud took the horse to a whole different level. I mean, he gave that horse what he needed at the time, and he seasoned him, and he got him to where he was patterned, put him in the right spot. And Paul seen that when he came, and all of a sudden, the money sold that horse because Spud didn't really want to sell him, so he just reared back and priced him high. Well, sold him. The other horse, Friendly, and Spud, he had the recognition he's going to get from that deal. He already knows those guys. They know who he is, and when he's got one for sale, I think they're gonna come talk to him about it. And he's got a horse that should have sold yesterday. We sent down here a kid rode, really nice horse. But for me, like for Friendly, I knew that horse the whole time I had him, and I was beating him up on him. He was good. I loved him, but he got to a point where I had some other younger horses that need to be rode, and it was time. I want to see that horse. So when I do that, I do it personally for the horse, not for the money. The one that I sold, that I just sold him to the Tryons. They came to me and asked me about him, and Clay Tryon told me, he said, I've been watching this horse for a long time, and we need one. He said, if I didn't think my kid was good enough, he said, I wouldn't even think about it. And the money was good. Don't get me wrong. I mean, it was good, but more than anything, I sold that horse to them because the horse and that kid, that boy is amazing, and he's at a certain stage in his career of rodeo to where him and this horse are gonna go to the top together. I mean, it's gonna be a neat thing to look up. So I like to see success. I go ahead and I know that they lowered me to 6+, but I was a 7-header most of my life, and I'm getting older, and I want to put, like, if I've got something that somebody else is going to do better on, I'm proud to say, yep, it's time. Go ahead and go. And it's a little heartbreaking sometimes when you have one that you put your heart and soul into. That horse I had since he was a yearling. So my wife and I rode him a bunch, but it was time. And I'm so happy to watch Tyler. And I could tell that when we were down there getting the horse vetted and everything, he was pretty excited about the whole deal.
Yeah.
And I mean, Clay Tryon, he's won everything there is to win. He's one of the most prestigious headers in the world. For a guy like him to take you serious about your horse, it's good for you because you're going to get the recognition. And when you call and somebody hears that you got something for sale, they're going to go, I'm answering the phone this time. So it's been good for us. It's been good for us.
So in your involvement in the team roping and the horse industry, and maybe you don't notice one. I mean, there's so much going into it that a lot of these holes that we saw, 5-10 years ago aren't there anymore as far as needs in the equine industry. But through your lens, is there any spots where you think there's a need where a young, ambitious guy can jump in and be successful?
I try to tell Spud, and then like Waylon, he'll end up, it'll work out good for him one day. But I feel like today, if I was a young guy, I would buy myself, and I've been lucky, so I've got a mare that's a pitchfork bred, just a ranch bred mare, and we roped on her for a long time, and she made a good head horse. Well, we decided to start breeding her, and I kind of get a little upset because the first colt we got was a filly, and then she just had another filly. So I thought about it, and I thought, that's perfect. That's what we wanted. We need that. We don't need geldings right now. We bred that mare to Notorious Big. So, the Riata buckle deal, everybody knows about that. It's a big deal. So I feel like if a young guy would take some mares and get them really, really broke and get them to where you're winning on them and they're just proven. And then those mares can be, what you would breed whatever you want to them. But if you had like I told him, I go, get yourself a handful of mares, like even if it was just 4 or 5, and that's every year you got 4 or 5 colts, and breed those to either Riata buckle studs, or if you like these rodeo guys, the guys that are buying these horses, like it's hard to sell a horse for lots of money unless the rodeo guy is gonna, because he can win it back. Those guys don't care really what's on their papers. They don't. They want to be able to back in the box and win. So if you find a stud that's not eligible for all this, they'll breed to them and make good horses, and it just helps everything in life to where when you're raising good horses, you're making good horses. Those guys take you serious. You might start selling the babies, for a lot of money, but I think you need to build that, and it takes a while because you got to make them horses. You got to prove them. Don't just breed to something that hadn't done anything. I think if in the roping world today, that's probably what I would want to do, and that's what I will do. I'll have these 2 fillies, and hopefully they make, and we hang on to them, and we just breed them.
So with the rope horse futurities catching on, and I mean they're still fairly new in the world of showing. What do you think it's going to be a different type of horse that finds success in the futurity versus something that finds its success on the rodeo road, just because of the different styles of roping?
Yeah, it is different. Although the futurity guys, they put a lot of work into them horses, and they do. It's not like they're just hurrying them through the process. I mean, they're to show one at the futurity and win. You gotta do your due diligence. You gotta work at it. So they're actually building a foundation for a horse, and I feel like, those horses. Now, if somebody else can get them, like say a guy like myself or Spud or somebody that can say, okay, now we're gonna haul them, and we're gonna take them to some jackpots and maybe some amateur rodeos and stuff like that. That horse has got a great foundation, and you're going to take him and you're going to bring him to the next level, and you're going to get him to a point where, because those rodeo guys, they really don't mess around with them horses till they're 10. So there's a lot that can happen, a lot that you can do till they're 10 years old, and then that's when those kind of guys are starting to look at them. But I mean, how many of those are you going to sell? There's not a lot, but you can be winning on them the whole time. You can have one, and then there's boom, I got 5 of them, but there's that certain one.
Yes,
that
sir.
one there is the one that those guys are going to come and start talking to you about.
Yeah, and it's more of a regurgitated thought, and I don't really know where it came from, but it's opened a lot of questions in my mind. But there's so much to be won. There's so much added money, like Riata Buckle. There's all these incentives and everything. And a guy like, it used to, be probably not very profitable to campaign something in the hopes of selling it at 10 or 12 when it was kind of matured and peaking in performance. And now, I mean, a guy can, these horses go through the futurity, and what the futurities run 4, 5, 6 is what the rope horse futurities are.
Yep.
So, I mean, there's still, potentially 5 years of a gap before those horses are desirable again.
Yes.
And now with all this added money and jackpots and everybody, you need to have a trailer to win or a saddle or a bunch of money in there to get people to come, because, I mean, there's a rope in you could throw a rock and hit 5 ropings.
Oh, I guarantee you, especially in this country. I mean, you can pull out the gate. Which way do you want to go today? But those guys, if they're buying those horses that have already been started right and hauled to the futurities, and they're pretty seasoned. I mean, they get a lot of runs and they get to see a lot of different things. And then if they can turn around and sell those horses to a guy that appreciates that and can say, I'm going to go to a World Series roping and win, and that guy hauls him for 3 or 4 years, and all of a sudden, one of these rodeo guys is knocking on your door going, hey, would you sell him? And that's kind of like a process. You'll see some futurity horses that are young that they do rodeo on. I mean, they're freaks. Most of them are. They're just so good, so young. But you don't see it a lot. But then the way they're raising these horses nowadays too has a lot to do with their minds. They're starting to mature younger. They're not. So I think it's gonna change. They're gonna start seeing guys ride younger horses.
That's one of the next thing I wanted to kind of mention is, like, you see, like, cutters, they have like 2-year-old guys where all this guy does is ride 2-year-olds, and then they'll come over here, because I mean, there's just so many horses that need to be shown that a guy can't run all his own 2-year-olds maybe if he doesn't have a full-time guy for him. Maybe he has an associated program. And I have a lot of interest. I'm in the cow horse right now, but I have a lot of interest in getting more serious in my roping and going to work for a rope guy here in a couple years when I'm done where I'm at now. And I still track other job postings as they come through, trying to see, like, well, am I qualified to work for some of these guys? And a lot of them you see like, oh, I need you to be a 5 or a 6 to come work for me, or this or that. And I'm thinking, maybe I get there in the next 2 or 3 years,
Yeah.
but maybe I don't. But what other value can I bring to a guy? And I think, especially with the futurities in the rope horses now, I think there's a need. I think you're going to see it in the cow horse. I think you're going to see it all over the place. And in the roping is maybe the next spot where you're going to have designated 2-year-old guys.
Oh yeah.
And if you can, take this cow horse front, because a lot of reject cow horses go on to be amazing rope horses.
Yep.
Because they're just so broken, they're so versatile, and they dang sure like are glued to a cow.
Oh yeah.
To take that kind of like foundation and really just get a willing and operational colt 2-year-old, I mean, it's almost like they're ready to be roped on so far before they're physically able to take that type of impact, I guess.
Yes. Yes.
And so do you see, like, since you have kind of you're in that world, a desire or whispers from other people talking about like where they start to see like a new need for help coming from that way, like?
Yes. Yes. To me, broke is broke and feel is feel. I mean, the way I was brought up and raised and cowboyed all the time, I always wanted, that perfection in my horses. Didn't matter what I was doing on them. Whether it had been catching stuff or roping on them or whatever. But so I feel like, for me personally, I'm always gonna want that feeling of, hey, my horse is pretty broke. And when I sell a horse to a guy, they're like, oh, this horse is light, and blah blah blah. I'm like, yeah, that's the way I ride them. But I will say that I feel like now this is a team roping is a discipline. You got cutting, and I see some of these guys trying to mix some of this stuff a little bit. And yeah, it works. I mean, look at all the rejects that have turned out to be good rope horses. But if we're going to make a rope horse and we're starting with that baby that's in there, there's some things that we don't need to do, because we're not looking for, it's going to be a reject rope horse that makes a cutting horse. That doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
So we're going to start from the ground up and we're going to try to make a rope horse. There's a certain way to ride those 2-year-olds. I feel like that's going to be something that we're going to start seeing more and more of. Like there's guys that are going to start a 2-year-old, they're putting a lot of feel in them and, draw back in them, a lot of stuff. That stuff, yeah, it's going to be good for your rope horse. But sometimes, I like them horses to have their shoulders up, their butt up underneath them and stuff. And so there's some things that I think there's an opportunity for 2-year-old guys to say, hey, we're training for rope horses here. And I think that's something that's going to be a whole different deal comes along. All of a sudden now you got 2-year-old guys riding 2-year-olds for rope horse guys. And I mean, why not?
Yeah.
Why not? It's a different discipline. Ride them different.
Because I look at it, I ask this question kind of selfishly because I know that that's something that I personally have goals of going. I would love to futurity some rope horses. I'd love to take some snaffle bit horses too. And I know combination programs, you kind of have to sacrifice a little bit of it sometimes to one side or the other. But I think about how am I going to get the experience working for a rope guy. And, right now I am committed to the cow horse and immersed in that fully. And I try and, when I can scratch my way into someone's, you get invited to go rope and learn something, I'm going to be there and do that.
Sure.
But maybe I'm not going to get to that height of roping. Like, I maybe won't make a 5 or a 6 in that amount of time before I'm ready to start going to work for someone.
Yeah.
And where I can convince someone I can still bring enough value for them to take that extra effort to put into me to where they don't have to worry about, if, are they going to have to run an extra 4 runs because I can't get something caught, still be worth having around.
Oh yeah. Yep. I think it's just, a person needs to just, find your lane, get in it, and just try to be, like we talked about, being the best you are at that. And I think they'll find value in having somebody around that might be limited to certain things. So we're going to focus on this that you're good at. And I think that's the best way to look at that. I think, that's the best thing about roping is there's always different handicaps. So you can start off. You can rope in lower numbered pots. You can rope in higher number, whatever you fit. But I think if a person just kind of, you're always going to strive to do better and learn more. And you're like a guy like you, you're young, so you got that on your side, and the sky's the limit. You know, you can do a lot with that. You get around the right guys that help you and let you kind of go ahead and ride certain horses or do certain things that normally you wouldn't. It just elevates your career.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's just get in your lane and do the best you can, and next thing you know, you might just step up.
So I want to kind of go back to your horse program a little bit, and kind of the type of horse that you're wanting to build, the type of feel, the type of mind. How did you come across? Was it just you've been on enough horses now that you kind of have this feel? Is it, you had said a minute ago that a lot of guys that, you know, they're not as worried about papers as some other disciplines may be. And something I had wrote down, like, was it papers, or is it like, are horses more individuals to you?
Yeah.
And when you find those ones that you want to start breeding, what that kind of process was for you? Is it something that you see them in as a baby, or is it a mare that you really like to feel and you're hoping and still waiting to see what their babies will be, and kind of what that process was for you getting your program rolling?
Yeah, for a long time I didn't, papers didn't matter for me. I liked a certain kind of a horse, and I like the same kind of a horse, although now I like to see the papers with it too. But in the mare, we got a good mare. I could have bred to a couple other mares that I've got, and I was like, no, it's not going to work. We'll wait. But the mare that we did breed to, she's proven, and everything about her was good. So we decided, hey, there's probably something good going to come out of this. But we look for like a certain. My wife and I, we've got the same eye for a certain type of horse. We look for, I would call it more of a ranch horse. A bigger, stouter, bigger bone, a stronger type of horse. I don't look for heel horses much because I don't heel a lot, and I really like the middle of the road horse is nice where you can do either way. But I lean more to the head horses. Head horses have been my passion. I love to make head horse, and so we look for that in like when we buy like colts or whatever, and that one's going to make what we're looking for. But then now the papers, I mean, that's getting to be a big deal, and we are. And then like Spud, he works up there where that's all they talk about is papers, So we've kind of got introduced into it more and more with him. But my wife, she's into the papers big time. Like we said, the Riata buckle deal is always something that we think about. So it's just one of them deals where I think that's what we look for in them. We're after kind of both right now.
And so obviously you need to have the size behind a head horse, especially at an open level, because you need something that's going to be able to pack your rider, handle this steer without any fault, make a move, and do it fast and athletically. But can you get a horse that is too big for what you're wanting to do? Like, obviously, I'm not talking drafts, but I mean, like height-wise, like when you get to a certain point, do you feel like now your swing needs to change because you're roping down on one, versus maybe if someone was a little shorter and wider, like you'd have a flatter delivery or something like that? Are you breeding specifically for those types of things, or is it still just the way you think this horse is gonna pass on the way it rides?
I like to have a horse about 15 hands, 15-1 maybe. I've even had some horses that were, pushing 16 hands. That's kind of, the older I get, the harder they are to get on for one. But that's a big horse. But there's guys that if they can move their feet and if they move around good, that doesn't bother a lot of people. I feel like sometimes when you're raising one, and all of a sudden you're like, man, where'd that come from? He got big. Don't give up on him, and go ahead and finish him and make him and be proud of him. And somebody somewhere is going to appreciate him. We sold a big horse here a couple of years ago that was just big, but he was good. And the guy that bought him, they love him. And actually, we sold him back to the guy that raised him, the guy that Joe Campbell that raised the good horse that I just sold Tryons. And he's we rode a lot of his colts. He's out there in Seligman, Arizona, and he had some troubles with his good horses, and we sold him that horse, and he's loving him. He's big, but they get along fine.
So what are some kind of big goals? We kind of made a comment earlier, I can't remember where it was, but you had said when you were potentially going to take over that lease, you'd said, this is what I've been wondering how I was going to get this, and now it's here, and that kind of fell through. What were some other goals that you had set for yourself that you've accomplished that you're proud of, that you think kind of shaped and like we're a corner post for the foundation of what you're trying to pass down? Say, like, if you stick to the plan, if you keep working hard, like, you can find this success.
Yeah.
And then what are some that you have for the future?
Well, like, I don't really say that I look at goals like a lot. I don't really, I mean, I guess you could say, this place, it was a goal of mine, that barn right there. I build barns for everybody else, but I've never built my own barn for myself, and I finally was able to, make enough money and set it aside to where I could build a place that, we could work out of, that I was proud of. We could have a barn. I feel like that's kind of been one of my goals, is to be able to be comfortable, and when I'm gone, my wife or my kids, or there's something left that they can look up and go, hey, Dad worked hard, and it's helping us, because a lot of people, your family passes away, and you got to figure out how to get them buried. You got to figure out how to come up with the money to do something, but not everybody's in the position to help their kids out. I want to be in that position. So this place means a lot to me, and heck, when you sell a horse for some pretty good money, you can pay some land off, and that's what I'm going to do. So that's a goal, I guess, that I've achieved that goal. I'm here. I've got the place, and it's something I'm proud of. Other than that, I can't think of anything else going forward, though. My goal for my sons is, I just want them to be good men. I want them to be very good men, and people be proud of and respectful. And my roping deal is kind of, I'm on that deal. I'm old enough to where now, thank God for having lower numbered pots, because I'm probably going to be in them one day. But making the rope horses is going to be something that I'll probably do until the day I die, and I'll work all my life. I'll never retire. My dad ain't doing it, and I'm not going to do it. So I like it. I love being out here. My wife is a go-getter. I mean, she's not going to let me slow down anyway, but my goal, I look forward to this. Maybe I'm not showing up at the roping, and everybody's like, oh shoot, Dan's here, and we got to butt heads with him. Maybe I'm getting to where that's kind of less and less, but I want to show up with my son, with Waylon, and they're gonna go, oh, Dan's here with Waylon, now we got to deal with Waylon. I like that. I want to win. And I've been a winner. Like, we're not doing this unless we win. So we're pretty competitive. I mean, it's not like this roping arena. We rope in here. It's not just all. You come over here and rope with us, it's probably going to be a lot of hollering and why'd you do that kind of deal. It's not fun, I guess. But what we get out of it is, we're fixing to go to roping down the road right now. I'm going to flag it, and he's going to work the chutes, and my wife gets to rope in the round robin. And it's just a little old round robin, but I'm telling you right now, it's cutthroat. She's going to try to win first. And that's how we are. We're made up that way. I want him to be that way. I want him to show up on a product that we've made and he's helped us make. And they say, hey, we can't beat that kid. He's got too good a horse. And that's how I want to see it go. And that's a goal of mine, to, just be as good as you can.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And I think too, something that you just said that kind of struck a chord with me was something that your son is going to be competing on, something he had a hand in making.
Yeah.
And regardless of just that pride itself, like when you think about like the actual like operation of going through the motion, backing in the box, getting in position on that steer, making your move, to have made the horse, I mean, it's at that point it's just an extension of yourself. Like riding, like to catch ride for someone or to buy something, and then you're going to town and trying to get that horse figured out. Like if you have the skill set and the facility and the opportunity to make them, or just to have, even if you're not making the horse, but get that amount of time in.
Yeah.
I mean, it just, there's nothing that compares to how in tune you can be with an animal and competing, and
Yes.
and to know that whether you get first place or you get a no time,
Yeah.
that there was
Yep.
a true sense of operation and bond with you and that animal. I
Oh,
think
yeah.
that's something that I'm growing to appreciate
Yeah,
a
that's
lot more, is just being in time with something.
Yeah, you know, nobody gets to see all the knockdown dragouts that you had in that practice pen with that horse.
Mm-hmm.
To where there were so many times when you're like, dang it, am I wasting my time? You know, we ran into a little wall here. We got to get over it. Are we going to get over it? And then all of a sudden it gets better, and then so now you've all those little bumps in the road got you to where you're at. So, you know, a lot of people might look up and go, man, he's got a nice horse. They don't really know what it took to get there. And to me, all those times is what makes it all worthwhile, because, yeah, you got to be proud of that, knowing that you're the one that did it.
Absolutely. Do you think I'm missing anything? Is there anything else we should get in here?
I don't think so.
I think this was a great one. I really appreciate you guys having me out to your place. I
Yeah.
really appreciate the hospitality and you meeting with me and doing this. And
Yeah, I think,
I mean,
you know, I think this is a great deal because you can tell your story. There's a lot of people I mentioned, and I like giving credit where credit's due, and so I mentioned the people's names, and there's some that I left out. We know that, but I think that's my story is from everybody that I was involved with, and the things in my life that all got me where I'm at, and I'm just happy to have good friends in life and great wife and great kids.
absolutely.
I think that's the way to go.
Well, now that I know you, I look forward to keeping an eye on your kids and watching their success, and
Yeah.
and I'll dang sure know where it came from, because
Yeah.
I don't know you well, but I can tell you are a good man, and I appreciate you giving me the time of day and having us out and doing all this. It
You
means
bet.
a bunch, more than you know.
Yeah.
Well,
I appreciate you.
thanks a lot, guys. We'll see you on the next one. And Dan, thank you very much.
You bet.